Hello, can you hear us all the way
Hello.
from far?
Yeah,
Do so.
loud and clear.
Excellent. All right, great. Is there a lot of feedback or what's going on?
No,
No, you're
no.
actually good.
Awesome.
We're all good.
Okay. Welcome, guys. What's up? What's
You look
going on
sharp
today?
today, my man. My man, you look
Thanks for
good. Looking
wearing
great.
the Bucky's hat today.
Hell yeah.
This is a national treasure day.
Oh, of course.
Big
I
day.
don't know if you could put that on YouTube. They'll take that down.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's a hate symbol in some way. But anyway,
Oh, I
I
got
had
you.
no idea.
to everybody, this is the team or three developers behind the team. We have two environment artists and Doom, the narrative, but they can introduce themselves and give a little rundown of what they play. So take the floor, guys, and people will be coming in this.
Let's go
All right.
alphabetical order. You first.
You first referring to me because I'm a B.
Yeah.
All right. No first names.
Hold on.
Hi there.
Let's
My
hold on.
name is Benjamin Misko. I am a environment artist. I guess it'd be the environment design lead or level designer on Transience. Chris handles most of the environment stuff. I also do some of the newer cinematic stuff that we're working on. As for my background, I've been working in video games for the last, I want to say 6, maybe 7 years now. Been doing a lot of freelance, very quickly dabbled in AAA. Been working in education and stuff like that, and things I'm sure you guys are familiar with recently, such as UEFN, the Unreal Fortnite ecosystem and all of that stuff, and then also Roblox here and there, and then now indie dev, working with these guys on Transience and a couple other titles out there. Um, Chris, take it away.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi there. My name's Chris. I've been working on video games as an actual job, something that pays the bills for about 3 years now. My original study is in electrical engineering. I'll probably be pursuing that still going forward, but we'll see how games goes. And I like to work on shaders. I like to work on just 3D modeling in general. My focus programs are Blender, Houdini, and Substance Painter. And yeah, I've got something cool to show you guys today if time permits. But please, Doom.
Hello. My name online is Doom, but I go by Takoyo, especially for uh, writing things. It's just my middle name. It's better presentable in that way. I've been writing like my whole life. That's kind of how it is for a writer. Met Ben recently, like about 5 years ago, and I started doing a little bit of writing for him on some of the different projects he was doing, just like theory crafting and stuff. And eventually was able to present my work to Bigfry, our project lead, and thus I got my task here writing for a video game. Um, the actual task of writing itself is its own thing. It's its own skill. It's adapting it to video games. That's been the most interesting thing for me on this journey, and hopefully I can continue to do that into the future and probably make it one of my main gigs. Yeah.
So, does anybody here have any questions before we get to any of the nitty gritty, interesting conversation? All right, we'll open it up then as we go through the questions. So you had some questions. So. I did. Um, my first question was sort of what is the process for working together on such like a large sort of project look like? Sort of how do you meet to discuss this? What's your sort of like management structure look like for this? Is it more like open ended? Sort of how focused would you say like you're scoped in for this specific role?
Um, I guess I'd probably be best to answer this just because I have the I've kind of been working remote for games uh, since COVID in a full time capacity, and so the variety of and I guess I'll speak to the Fry project and let these guys chime in on Transient specifically before jumping to the other stuff. But pretty much everything is handled via a primary communications network, and then you just have your and like our hierarchy is pretty I guess you'd say loose, and it's not super standard for the Transience project, just because it ultimately is a group of friends and former coworkers kind of coming together to make something, versus the I guess you'd say more traditional route of like securing investment and financing and all of that stuff, and then assembling your team with like onboarding and all of that good stuff, and then you have like your hierarchy of power, if you will, um, going down the list there. But this is more of a you have, I guess we have a significantly smaller amount of work hours every week. So it's basically just a matter of ensuring that we're all available uh, within a standard, I guess, working hour time. And then some of those who have special obligations will essentially, uh, I guess, be present when they're allowed to be present, and then everyone else will accommodate them. We're international, so we have our lead programmer, I guess you'd say, is from Australia. All the rest of us are working under ET and CT in the States. And you can imagine how complicated that can be when it comes to doing stand-ups or daily check-ins and things of that nature. And then we have people from the UK and all across, pretty much all across the world. Um, it's just really about making sure everyone's flexible and on top, like on the ball all the time when it comes to just being available or communicating when you're available. And then we have daily stand-ups that kind of cover the rest of the gaps, if that makes sense. I hope that answered your question. And if anyone else has any other information to chime in on, go ahead.
It did answer my question. Thank you. I had a sort of similar question, but you kind of answered it with during that, which was sort of what's the sort of like how did you get together to make this? But you kind of answered that with just sort of you built up a few relationships over past jobs or just already existing friendships, and then you guys all just decided, hey, we're gonna make a game. And that's sort of how it turned out, or is that like
We can
Yeah.
go more into that.
Bingo. I mean, that's pretty close to it. I mean, we just kind of learn of each other through other professionals, and if you know how to do something good, um, well, you'll be wanted in places. Make friends and be diligent in your work and be diligent in what you can demonstrate. That's a super big thing.
I'm gonna tap the opposite of that. Argue with people on the internet.
Oh no!
So
do
like
that.
literally the reason Ben and I are friends is because we argued about the details of a show. I think it was The Expanse, and I wrote a way too long thing breaking down the episode events, and that was like the first major thing that we went back and forth on. And then we just kept on talking, kept on chatting, talked about movies and things. And because of that, because I knew Ben, that was kind of my initial in with actually being a name on a list, so to speak. When you're like going to start a project, you don't have anyone who you're automatically thinking of. You want to have people who's like, if this person could start their career and you think they'd be good at it, you want to have a list of people like that. And that's kind of where networking comes in. You want to know more people, always. Even if some of them are dicks, like me.
What is it? That actually kind of brings me to another point that does not involve dicks, but
Hey, yo.
the I guess the idea of you asked like how everyone came together, and I did want to just clarify that a little bit because this initial Dustin is our main like project lead. We mentioned him. We'll mention him as Fry. Kind of going forward, but him, Matt, our kind of secondary project lead, and myself, we've worked on a dozen like smaller. We worked on like meme games, and making fun of like crypto and all that stuff within like the last few years as just like fun freelance projects. Because Dustin Fry is a pretty sizable content creator. He makes YouTube and Twitch content. And so for his, and he works on like game criticism stuff. So we all met through that, and we were talking about building out a project. And Matt was working on a project called Operation Valor, and so he knew developers from there that artists
Me.
and things of that nature, and then I knew people from guys like Doom or Tikoyo, and then we all kind of just banded together through that to kind of make the rest of the team, and as well as Frankie or Finn, I suppose.
Who
The
won a contest,
Game
right?
Dev.
He won the
Game Jam. So we all kind of just met each other through that, and then assembled that team from that list of individuals. And now we're all getting paid pretty well. The thing about or I guess to wrap it around back to Doom's comment or statement regarding like just knowing people and meeting people is that's how you get your foot in the door with a lot of these things. And if you are trying to, I guess, get your foot in the door with the industry, the best thing you can have is a portfolio of work that I'm not saying like you need 30 things. You just need one. You can have 2 or 3
Yeah,
like
it's so idiosyncratic.
really solid pieces of work, and you just need to know people and just start like dabbling in little side projects, and do not make them big, but make them be pretty and elegant, and that's how you're going to get your foot in the door with a lot of these industry types. And I know it's how I got my foot in the door and working with
Yeah.
like freelance and just building a little
I mean,
network of people I know.
hell, I mean, most of you guys are programmers, right? Like, can I get a show of hands? Like, everyone's doing computer science in here?
Pretty much everybody in here is
Yep.
computer science or computer engineering.
Got you. Okay. I'm going to assume the young man who did not raise his hands in computer engineering. Okay. Fair enough. But nevertheless, no, nevertheless. Yeah, I mean, when it comes to programming stuff, like, I think a good note to always remember is like a lot of these games that you grew up with came from reused or recycled logic from previous business applications. If you look at things like Age of Empires and such, that's a bunch of guys who worked in logistics and inventory and in industrial management software. So like whenever you're making something, just never forget that like whenever you're making a tool, it can become a toy. So try and always just like play around with things that you know that you've seen somewhere in like a problem before, and find ways in which they make them fun. And then to circle back around to the actual structure of the company, having a very particular um, how would I put this? Structure is probably going to be important coming into the new decade. Like, don't think of always trying to attach yourself to existent frameworks of how companies work. You want to try and look for new ways to skin the cat. The thing that you're always going to be after is going to be like, does it work? If it conforms with reality, then you've made something useful. So you really shouldn't be dogmatic. It's to be quite honest with you, a lot of this is just imagination. You just gotta kind of figure out what works and what doesn't, and that's what I always kind of find frustrating when I think about those kinds of questions to myself too.
Well, all right. He has a good question, right?
Yeah. I have like I think roughly 1 or 2 more questions. So sort of following off that idea of just like everything you make can have like a purpose, but sometimes you'll like it, that's like once the idea is fully formed and like you've actualized it and everything, it's like a finished sort of like product. What's the sort of process look like, especially on like such a larger scale than what most indie developers are normally accustomed to, for like actually refining an idea or a process? Like, have any of you had like something you pitched or you like designed? What was the process for like getting that back and refining it into like a finalized part of the game?
Is it time for my presentation?
It very well might be.
Because
well, I mean,
actually, that would answer the question.
Are you talking more about like a new like I guess you would call it mechanic within the game, or in using an existing quirk of the controller and like finding a way to like finagle it into a level? I mean, what do you mean
how
exactly?
macro or micro are you
Yeah.
talking about?
I definitely meant specifically like just talking about like any part of it. Like even if you're doing just like concept art or like environment art, it's like if you made something Like, obviously, at some point, like maybe like so they wanted something specific, or like the big overall design needed something else. So, what was the sort of like process behind that? Is sort of more what I was asking. Though making mechanics off of like a random bug you found is always incredibly fun. I can
Well,
attest.
that's part of level design too. I mean, Ben would be, better suited to answering level design questions because most of my level design, I guess, additions have always been like, wow, what a strange quirk of this player controller. How can I turn it into something that I can try and take advantage of level design wise? But please, Ben.
I'm actually gonna throw this to Koyo because this that he made a little presentation or has a little demo of kind of exactly how this would work. I don't know if are we able to share screen, Talon?
You should be able to. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So go ahead and do that because yeah, he has a really wonderful kind of demo of how this all works.
Roger. 1 sec.
Let me see if screen sharing works, and I'll focus it.
Yeah, here
If
we
that
go.
actually sticks out.
Yeah, this will work just fine.
Perfect. Well,
Wonderful.
I crafted this whole thing because it's something that I intended to do for later. Because one of the most important things about working with other people is actually the communication and delivering your ideas. Because my job is presenting the story, so that goes into the actual game. But I have to talk to Ben, Chris, and the rest of everyone to make sure they understand what they should be making. Because ultimately, when you're looking through a level and you're like, what's the player supposed to be doing here? You have to look to gameplay and you have to look to what's happening narratively if you have a narrative game. Delivering ideas, especially, is one of the most important skills you're going to need to learn. Because simply telling someone that I want the gadget to do X is not sufficient. You got to be able to explain or show how it's done. Whether you have to make that a little paint image that you draw up so you can make a diagram for it or whatever. So in that, I went over here and I set up a fake story. This has nothing to do with actual transients. I just made it up. So this framework is how I have to work. Gameplay is first. Gameplay is always king. It'll always be king. Everything that you do will come from the gameplay. So in this case, the player can only use pistols in the game. It means you can't use long rifles, you can't use snipers, none of that. So the first character note that you have that's actually important is that the character, John, has a preference to use pistols. You can inform his personality by that, by noting the fact that he always uses combat around pistols. So every flavor line that he has about like, oh, I should get up closer, approach this situation whatever way, however you want to write it, that has to be informed directly by this, which is informed by the gameplay. He makes comments about mocking snipers, and he even gets into an argument about a rifleman at some point about him just saying that pistols are the best shit and rifles ain't nothing. Additionally, and here's where the planning comes in. John is 25 years old. Not important. You can do whatever you want with that. There's no connection to anything. You could connect it, but it's not right now. It has no connection. He also has several siblings. This is just backstory stuff. It's stuff for you. It's stuff for you to use later. You want to have things like this so that you have pieces to play with later. Now, that said here, eventually one of his siblings might be a villain. I'll spoil it for you. I never used that in this example. But we get here where he handles everything in close quarters. That's the whole game. There's a point where the main antagonist decides to use snipers against John. Everyone in the team approves of it. Everyone's down with this story. We eventually get to the point where, because he has a preference on pistols, a sniper level existing is very difficult to get around. You have to sneak around the enemies, you have to dodge and duck behind cover, and you have to get up close to even have a chance of fighting them. And the problem is the next part of the story is that John's family comes in. That's where we pull this piece back in and we drag it over here. And we get our nice little connection there of where that shows up. That's narrative work. Problem, this isn't fun. This, like let's just say that while we're developing this isn't fun anymore. And now you have this huge issue of The game is no longer fun. Gameplay is king. We are now changing it so that long rifles are now introduced into the game. You now can use long rifles throughout the game. And let's say that the long rifles are introduced at this level. The problem is that now makes all of this focus, all of this detail and whatnot, it needs to shift. Everything past this point has now become somewhat broken. It's become, you can leave it in there, but your story's going to suffer. And you're going to have to make sure that you are ready to deal with that. That's going to happen all the time in game dev, and you need to know how to deal with it. My solve for this would be to zoom over here, and because we have John's history with his siblings, we can say that his oldest brother taught him to use pistols and was an expert with them, but that's the only thing his brother taught him to use. We can also keep with his inexperience of using long guns going with the pistol thing, which now means we have these two things connected. We can drag them over here. We can drag them over here. And now these two will repair this issue here and make it so that through the course of the game, these conversations can shift a little bit. And now John is someone who learns to appreciate rifles throughout the story, which justifies how you can keep this story beat and all that stuff if you decide to change it that way. Doing this stuff is like 90% of the actual writing work and planning for things. Because generally speaking, if you're a writer, you can just bang out a story that's in your head really quick, but you're going to have to deal with the fact that your programmers, your level designers, all that stuff, they're going to change details, and you're going to have to be able to adapt. That's how every job in game dev works. Chris has had to adapt levels for me. Ben has had to he's added sections, but he checks with me beforehand, and that's part of that communication thing, so that I give the approval of the location, it can slip in there, but then maybe there's some other issue with like gameplay, there's some kind of gameplay issue there, or Frankie has some issue with it, and we have to address it. It's all communication, bouncing back and forth, and fixing things as we go.
As you gentlemen can see, this becomes a multi-body problem.
Yep.
It's very difficult to detect where these changes come, and you can only see so far out. You just have to be flexible.
Mm-hmm. And also be very careful, because I did this. Like some of these things I wrote small bits, but be careful when you're delivering ideas. Nobody wants to read your giant blurb of crap. Like you want to be able to shrink it down a bit and make it easier for people to understand, you know? All about communication. It's probably the most important thing, honestly. And that's my little presentation.
Excellent. It was good. Yeah, that was great.
I hope that answered your question. It did have a little bit of a
A little bit of a roundabout.
Yeah.
But Biggs, you had some questions. If you want to go ahead, you can ask them for me. All right, that'll work. Does anybody else have any questions? Yeah, do you guys have any questions? Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
So what you mentioned having like worked briefly in AAA, what are like the most striking, I guess, unexpected differences between like AAA and indie dev? Because I mean, you'll know some like lower workloads, like lower, I guess, expectations for what you're able to pull off as a smaller team. Is there anything that stood out as surprisingly different?
I want to make sure I heard the answer or heard the question correctly. Could you it's a little muffled on the mic. Yeah, just step up real quick. Ask again. I'm sorry.
University Tech didn't work, so you give a round of applause.
Surprise, right?
Yeah.
So, like, one of you mentioned briefly working in AAA game development. So I was wondering what some of the less expected differences between AAA and indie development are, because I mean everybody has like this idea that like they expect less of indie developers because of lower time, like less time, less money, smaller teams. But like, is there anything that stood out where you're like, wow, I was expecting this to be more similar?
Right. I am very jaded when it comes to the topic of AAA. So let me be as not jaded as possible with this response. When you're getting into AAA, the thing that you usually encounter, at least in the gaming sphere, is you are walking into a very well-oiled machine. If there are kinks, with a person, they simply do not work at the position that they're currently working at. And if they're not like one of my bosses told me, if you have a problem for more than 20 minutes, you need to be asking somebody, because they wanted to ship a game every year, and they wanted to do X, Y, and Z with that game, and they were gonna make sure that they got it done within a set amount of time. And with indies, it's a lot more problem solving than that. When you don't have 500 people around an office or a studio in a massive Slack communications like chat, you can't just ask somebody a question and someone figured it out 10 years ago. You're constantly searching forums, documentation, all of those things to try and figure out your problem,
Creating
or
your own
God
shit.
forbid, YouTube
Right.
tutorials to really get around that problem. And that's really the major difference between indie and AAA. But the other huge thing, I come from a level design background, mostly, so I usually work with just game design on a level basis. And the thing that I talked about when I jumped into this project that I didn't want to see happen, when we kind of started Transience, was when you walk into a AAA. I'll use the example of Call of Duty as an example I am well aware of. The They do not design their maps around the narrative that exists. They say this level needs to do this in a single sentence. This is the mission objective. This is what needs to happen. The level designer goes out and makes the mission in white box and then passes it between gameplay, and they do all of the encounter design, all of the writing, and all of the AI, like, all the walkthrough AI stuff you'd see in like a Call of Duty campaign or something at the very end. um, that the writing comes so secondary to how a lot of these games get written, because they got to ship every year, right? And so they have a level designer go in, and that mission will be done, and then the writer just gets to slot pieces in wherever they can, to make that function. And then if they need a slight adjustment, sure, that can get tossed in. But for the most part, all of that stuff is very secondary and last minute and very not thought out until the very end of the game. I hope that answers your question. Cool. Sweet.
That's interesting, because one of my questions that I had was just like, a brain teaser question was, which comes first, the story or the game? And it seems like the answer is really it depends. It depends on who you're working for or whatever the project is.
Right. And I know Takoyo can kind of answer this as well, but a story can save a game, but a game cannot necessarily save a bad story.
Right.
And that is like, you can play a horrible game, worst controls you've ever used in your life, but if that story just grips you and it is really good and the dialogue's on point, amazing. You're gonna love that game for all time. I mean, we've all played. I don't know if you've all played Mass Effect, but or any of the old KOTOR games, same deal. Worst controls you've ever played, amazing story. The same would, but obviously the gameplay, if the story isn't a huge focus, can absolutely trump everything else. When we're talking about, like Takoyo said earlier, gameplay is king. So I don't know if you have any notes on that.
It is an interesting. It's an interesting topic because obviously I'm somewhat biased towards thinking the story should have a significant amount of importance, but ultimately I'm still a gamer in the first place. So like when I'm playing a game, I play Dragon Ball games for one, and the story in those ain't. He ain't really cooking with the story in those. I'm like there to punch something. I'm there to shoot a big beam, and I want the gameplay to be really fun and whatnot. And for me, normally gameplay can supersede a story entirely. A story can save a game, but I'm generally more worried about the gameplay itself. The most interesting thing to me is like ludonarrative dissonance, where it's describing when you have a game where the game is only letting you do a certain thing, or the game is making you do something right after the story said you couldn't or you could. It's where it's not matching. Most famous case being in recent memory being the Lara Croft game, Tomb Raider, the Tomb Raider reboot, where Lara Croft, in the game story, she has no experience fighting. Really, she doesn't really have much experience doing anything other than finding stuff like hunting down artifacts and whatnot. She ends up in a situation where she has to fight over an AK-47, I think it is, to save her life, and she ends up shooting the guy. And in the cutscene, she's freaking out. She's literally having a panic attack because she just shot someone. And then in the next 10 seconds, the game has you needing to shoot 3 or 4 guys with the AK while she's shouting about how she doesn't want to do this. And it's just like everyone who played that felt this massive disconnect because she's having a panic attack right now, and now I'm just willy-nilly gunning these people down. So you want to avoid that as much as possible, and that's partially why I stick by the statement gameplay is king. If your story, it's easier to adapt a story than it is to adapt an entire set of gameplay. I guess is my kind of thought on the position. But ultimately, it does also depend on who you're working with. Some people care way more about story. Some people care way more about game.
You have a question? Yeah,
I also just want to note our game. We chose a game for us all to play for this semester, and it was a Mori, which is just effectively a really really good story, but attached to 2008 RPG Maker controls. So definitely can kind of see how there's a balance between both. You can have, in my opinion at least, you can if either of them are completely terrible, then there's no saving it. But you can almost balance them and make up for a decent or mid story with excellent gameplay, or a really really great story with all right gameplay. But I had a question about the sort of information charts you showed earlier. The example with story writing and sort of working it back towards gameplay. And it's sort of, I guess, just question of how do you so you specifically emphasized that communication was key for this type of thing, and I guess the immediate question that jumped to mind is how do you communicate the communication charts? Do you when you have them prepared or ready, do you just sort of just put them somewhere, or do you does everyone sort of meet up around it and
Chris was saying that it depends.
Yeah, good luck.
I mean,
that one.
so I mean, there's kind of 3 ways we go about this. We do a one-on-one call where it's if there needs to be a specific point where it's I don't like how this looks in the level, I pull Gage in and I'll be like, hey man, this needs to be fixed. We need this done at X time. And sometimes we don't hit X time. We'll pick Y time, and we make it so. Another way is we'll use Obsidian, and we push the Obsidian doc to our repo, and then Obsidian will automatically update inside of our open vaults, and we'll see immediately what's ready to go. And then there is also ClickUp, I believe, but ClickUp is more focused towards programming tasks, from my knowledge, for what we use it here. I mean, a lot of our communication is going to always be just talk to your boys, man. You're making something from nothing. You always gotta be exchanging ideas, exchanging thoughts, trying to get the feel of the room, and make something you can all be proud of. If you're not talking to your guys, you're never gonna get anything. That's always the rub. It doesn't matter how you do it. Just make sure everyone's in on the ball. I mean, sorry, in on the game, and everyone knows where the ball is. That's a really difficult thing to do. That's super soft skills. That's not something where it's oh, I'll just write a macro for it, or I'll write a tool. It's no, you just got to be visiting with your boys constantly.
Yeah.
And also respecting each other's downtime as well. That's a really big thing too. Don't talk to me on weekends. Don't mess with me now. Don't mess with me here. And yeah, it's just about being respectful, because what you want to do is communication as well. It's also based on having good rapport with guys. A dude isn't going to tell you man, this sucks if he doesn't like you, or maybe he might always say it sucks, or he won't really communicate with you. Like you gotta be good with your guys. Like this is a very difficult thing to do. Like there's very few things that are quite like game development in terms of the expectation of communication and rapport that you need among your fellow designers. Just because I mean that's the whole point of these. Like you're deliberately taking something that is literally makes waste. We just waste electricity when we play video games in a lot of ways. There's no real set outcome aside from make it fun. So it's going to require a lot of like getting to know your dudes, always being in contact with them, always being honest, and just being where everyone's at. Like that is the big thing. It is. I have I'm sorry that it sounds like such a general response, and it almost feels like wow, these guys suck. What
Can do a
basic
more
info?
specific one if you want, bud.
But I guess so. But I mean, yeah, to be specific, like when Frosty and I are like working on a particular level, if I see something I don't like, I need to make it so. I need to say it then because it's just gonna hold inside of me like, wow, this doesn't look good. It's gonna ruin my productivity because it's like, wow, how do I make this look good? Like, you gotta be straight up with people, show them what's going on, and yeah. That's the best way to go about communicating. And then for the platforms of communication, Discord, Carrier Pigeon. Well, not Carrier Pigeon. You want to be fast about it. Discord, Slack. Having something like Obsidian shared between a repo to where you can update different files. Having things that can reference within Engine. That's what I like about Obsidian. You can get real powered up with it to where you can start referring back to stuff in Engine by file location, and you can make it clickable. These it's really powerful. Just find something that works with your workflow and make sure you're always communicating with your boys.
Yeah, organization. I highly recommend Obsidian. Organization is one of the most important aspects of all of this. I was terrible at organizing when we first started. Everything was in one Google Doc. It was actually a nightmare. Like the characters were at the top, the script was at the bottom. Below that was the slang in like language. It was terrible. You want to make sure everything is as organized as you can possibly make it, so you can take whatever small bits of information you need to deliver to somebody and hand it right off to them. Uh, and there's the last aspect of like it's what's the word for it? Motivation, morale is the word for it. We don't really talk about this much, but Fry's actually a really good morale and hype man. Like he always stays on top of that.
Yep.
Ben actually told us, he told all of us that something was going to happen when we were somewhere in development, that eventually, one by one, we would just kind of stop caring. We would just like lose the luster of wanting to keep on with this project because projects take a really long time. And at the start, we were all just like, no, it's not going to happen. We're good. We're going to keep on cooking. We're just going to solve whatever problem we have. And then inevitably, it just starts happening. And like you kind of start feeling the stress of how long you've been working on this one thing, and then it had to change, and then it had to get reset, and now you got to work, and how much more do you have to do? Oh my god. And all these other processes that aren't done, and we're making this level for this thing, but this mechanic isn't done yet because we're all working at the same time on like progressing through this. And it's just it ends up being this mind virusy type nightmare that just kind of sticks in your head for a really long time. And honestly, I think the one fix for it is having at least one person, especially the project lead, being a go-getter, being like, no, we got this, we're going to do this. And like, he always stays high energy no matter how the situation is. He always wants to get it done. And feeding off of that energy makes it so much easier to keep going, even when you start getting goobered, you know?
Definitely.
The to summarize, because the original question was asking about like how to communicate these kind of ideas to a project leader, to anybody for that matter. And the best way to kind of put it together in your head is if a first grader can look at this and get a general idea of what you're trying to talk about, then you're good. If it's anywhere above that, if you're asking people to read a paragraph or a novel or even a 2-3 page document that you've made, or just like do a code review or whatever, it's just assume it's not going to happen. And they're gonna blow smoke up your ass or whatever, to just say they're just gonna brush it off and say, yeah, this is fine. And then something further down the line is gonna come back and bite you. and that's generally the way this is. I've always found this to work. Just be very clear, concise, and straightforward to the point. But also, there's a balancing act here when it comes to making sure you communicate as quickly as possible. I know I'll use a recent example between me and Chris. I had an issue with one of his rooms that he designed for an apartment building we were working on. It was a laundry room, and I couldn't quite put into words what was wrong with it at the time. So I asked the rest of the group in a chat, "Hey, does this look weird to anyone else?" And we had a little bit of an internal, I guess you'd call it, drama, if we're going that far. But it was just a small discussion, and we just talked about like, "Hey, what is the issue with this room?" And we just hammered it out real quick. Like, don't let the weird like inner I guess fighting or feelings between you and another person impact the entirety of the project, if that makes sense.
So,
Yeah.
were you going to say something, dude? Are you going to add on?
No, we're all
Okay.
good.
I'm sitting here in awe because as you guys are talking, you're naturally stealing all of my questions. Like I probably have about a quarter of things I can ask that hasn't been
Excellent.
talked about, I think, which is awesome. It's incredible. But I wanted to go back to burnout. I wanted to go back to remaining motivated with how Dustin, also known as Fry, and how he's a high energy individual and keeps everybody motivated and does a really good job with that. My question was, how could you, or is there any advice you could give to stay inspired and to keep the mind fresh and above all, avoid burnout as you're working on projects? Because anybody who works on game projects learns very quickly that it is a time consuming endeavor. It is nothing but time involved in it. So how can you stay inspired like that? Do you think it's a team lead that is absolutely required, or are there other techniques?
I
Need a Finn here for this one.
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
we do need a
having
freaky, yeah.
having this be like more programmer focused, I guess. I don't know, man. I mean, because I don't do game logic on this project, but whenever I get hung up like doing anything like on my own personal stuff, when it comes to logic, it's just like I put it down and I go for a walk. But when it comes to like large projects in general, though, you have to remember like why everybody's there. They want a game. That's why you're doing this. You want to see a finished product. You just have to constantly remind yourself that like all of the countless hours, all of the frustrating like nah, I can't come out tonight. Nah, I got to finish this. Like you know what it's for. And just always being like clear in your resolve where it's like I want to see a finished game out of this. That's all it takes. The journey of 1,000 steps, right? What does it begin with? A single one. And it's just going to be countless additions of those going forward.
As for techniques, stay mobile, so to speak, mentally. I think one thing you'll learn, even if you're just narrative writing, one thing you'll learn is that getting your hands in engine is actually a really good thing. Setting up voice lines or figuring out, like I've had to learn a little bit of Unreal that I didn't know at all before, because it makes it easier for the rest of them if I'm doing something with voice line setup or whatever that they don't have to do. If I'm populating something they don't have to waste their time on. And in the process of learning that amount of things, and I suppose modding as well, because I do a little bit of that, the thing that normally keeps me motivated if something is kicking my ass and taking too long is switching focus to another thing that I can do I can do quickly. Success, basically. Small successes. So if something's beating on you, basically, you want to hop over to something else that you can get done really fast. What Ben was getting at when he mentioned Frankie is I almost said more bad words. We have a freaking savant on our team. And he, like, if you give him something to do, normally he'll have it done in like a couple days. It's kind of ridiculous. So that's why he was saying, like, it'd be nice to know exactly what he does or like how he would answer this, because he just burns through stuff really fast.
Yeah. I can summarize for him because I've talked to him a lot about this because we work on our I guess you'd call them not unorthodox, strange game projects. uh, in combination with the stuff we do on Transience. Um, the but one of the things he's figured out that he likes to do is just systems. He doesn't want to deal with the minutia of like adapting or adjusting weapon values to make like balance happen in a player controller and like a bunch of weapons on a spreadsheet and
I
making
did
them
that.
feel balanced. Yeah, so he had Doom do it. So, but the thing he likes to do is like we're working on a ridiculous little game called Dishwashing Simulator, and so he added everything under the sun, like monsters and like randomly generated dungeons and like
Farming.
there's pets, there's farming, there's fishing. You can cook the fish after you fish. It's a nightmare.
And it's all,
But
it's all in the context of dishwashing. That's it.
yes, absolutely. But like, so the thing he realized he'd like to do was just develop systems. And I guess that goes into a separate topic of kind of like finding what's for you and making sure you can do it endlessly. But as everyone has said in here, it's also about just making sure you can navigate those difficult times. And if that's, taking a 10-minute break and just walking outside or whatever to get you to get back on that computer and start writing code or making models or whatever, do it. You got to find what makes you happy and just make sure you can do what you're about to try. Like if you're making a whole game, you need to make sure you can see it to the end. Because you don't want to get
True.
halfway and then restart. Because that is the worst thing you can do.
We all have our little mini game graveyard. We've all got that Unreal or Unity project that has a bunch of little different systems we've made, and we just kind of use it as a place to ponder, kick the ball. That's good, but if you want to make a game, that ain't it. That ain't gonna cut it.
Well, that's good because it leads me into my next question. Do you think that new artists, writers, developers, or anybody who's dabbling in arts should be realistic in their goals when they're starting out, or do you think that having this overambitious idea or something exciting that you don't know could be done, but you think it's right on the edge of it, you think that being in that area is a rite of passage for being a better artist or making a better product?
Back burner it.
That's your playground, man. You need that. That's like your invisible college. Like that's where you go and interact with ideas that others have put forth, and that's where you get to have dialogue with them. Like you can't go to the guy who like invented a particular like shader setup for like vertex animation on a bunch of different characters and like directly contact him. He's busy. He won't answer. I've tried it. Like you have to go do these things yourself. You need these places, like because that's where you can actually come to find, like, oh shit, I've made something better. Like,
Yeah.
and that's where it's like, well, when it comes time to actually make a game, and I saw that this guy put this in his game, well, I could use it. But that's also what's really important about like working with a team, like the competition of egos on projects, and I shouldn't say competition. It is okay. I'm really hooked up into like 16th and 14th century alchemist guys. I really like Nicholas Cusanus, Leibniz, dudes like that. And when you're making something, you always have to start from nothing. And it's really hard to do that with like one person. You need multiple people. There needs to be a catalyst. So, yeah, having this little like big project, I shouldn't say little, but this big project that you keep in the background, I think is 100% necessary because it's effectively your library of tricks. It's your compendium. It's your I'm trying to think of another good word for a book. I don't know, man. It's just that's where you keep it all. And
It's your
yeah,
life.
a Bible in a
Yeah,
certain
yeah.
sense, yes.
Perfect.
It's something that you actually get to bring along with you, and you can actually discuss with other professionals, other wayward fellows, journeymen, about this is what I've done, this is what can be done, and with your term of artist, I will say this, my friend. I think it's more useful for us to look at ourselves as like a welder or a carpenter, because they have actual endpoints, and I don't think they've been poisoned by I guess you would call it. The cultural background. When we think of artists, we think yes, the mode. We think of artists. We think of guys who like sit in a room and there is a there's the sound of fluttering violins and the camera jumps around in different places and all of a sudden there's a new piece of art. No, what we do here is it's hard work, as much hard work as you can find sitting in a chair. But it's things that can be broken down into steps. We are craftsmen at the end of the day. We are artisans. We're making something. We're making toys.
Or
Oh damn,
Mhm.
he's bringing them politics in here.
No,
No,
it ain't
it's
politics,
fine.
man.
Hey, we're all good. It's all good. We love it.
Uh, for the ambitious project that you have. Oh, there's a question.
Yeah, if you
It's exactly.
okay.
Oh,
Go ahead, finish.
for the giant ambitious project that you have, my advice is to back burner it, which is it's similar to what Chris was saying, but you if you have something wide reaching that you want to do, if you want to make the next Grand Theft Auto type game that's designed that way, do not start it now when you were learning. You want to keep that on the back burner. You want to collect as many notes, as much information as you can. You want to gather up all of the resources that you could possibly need to then deliver those ideas to other people who will be your team. You don't want to amateur hour your way through the first bits of something and then try to Frankenstein it more and more as you get further along and you learn more things. Because if you don't have a good foundation for anything that is ambitiously large, it's going to end up falling apart. It's going to end up not as good as you want it to be. And you're probably going to end up not liking it at all at that point. And it might make you even lose heart. So, my recommendation, and this is actually an extension of something that another friend told me a super long time ago. Um, if I'm writing 6 novels in the background, I should not actually be starting with that first of the 6 novels as the first thing that I publish. That's a terrible idea because you want to learn and make all of your mistakes on something that's earlier. In fact, we've actually kind of said that a little bit about Transience, where it's like we want to make whatever mistakes we need to make here so the next thing that we make is even better. And in that way, because you keep it on the back burner and you just keep tossing ideas back there, you keep feeding it, eventually it will be a giant thing that is just a swath of information that you know how to do something with. And then you can start figuring out how you're going to execute this giant project when you have all of that information in tow. That would be my advice to you. It's also literally what I'm doing. So hopefully it works out.
To add on to that very briefly, the important thing, and I'm surprised actually no one asked. You were talking about these projects, and I guess it comes down to a matter of intent. So my question to you, Talon, would be relating to your question. Are these projects you're referring to something you are intending to ship or keep as a portfolio piece, or what is the use case?
Probably portfolio piece, if anything.
Okay.
I think whenever you start talking about like that, it really determines on where you begin because you don't know how it's going to end from the beginning. Like if you're just working alone or something like that,
Right.
maybe you intend for it to become a portfolio piece, but you miss shy of the mark, and so you shuffle it away. But you remember that you learn from it.
Yeah.
But for the sake of argument, we'll say portfolio piece.
Okay. So to answer that question, ambition and all of that stuff is great. I'll use these guys, referring to Chris and Gage, our two artists on Transience, as a great example of kind of how best to do this. When they don't know how to do something, whether it's a shader or a specific object that they're trying to make and they're just not sure how it's going to turn out, they ended up making a little map, a little environment that'll never see the game, but it's very small. And it's just a test bed for all of their different stuff. So they throw graffiti in there. They throw all of their different little assets they make in there to see how they look in a lighting condition, whether they'll pass visually to see it in like kind of a game engine environment and all of that stuff. But what that does is it basically takes that super ambitious idea you had and applies it into an environment at the very least where you can see it kind of working with everything else. And that would be the goal, I suppose, or translating that into what I imagine would be programming for most of you in here. You need to figure out a way to make those ambitious ideas very reachable And then if they're not, you should probably hold off, like Takoyo said about backburnering, or like Chris said, just figure out a way to kind of poke at it over time and make sure you have a very different outlet. Because if we're talking about building a portfolio, the like I said at the start of our little session here, the thing you're going to want is to maximize quality and to maximize the, I guess, amount of projects you can have. Because you realistically, once you leave school, you need to start thinking about employment within like that 6 month to a year time frame. Otherwise, that schooling or that degree you have is going to start fading over time, and that's just a realistic thing. But I saw
Keep
someone else had a
cooking.
question, so
Yeah. You had a question. As he runs down.
no rush, man.
Dun, 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 dun.
So I guess what is something that y'all each do to not get lost in game development? Because something I run into is sometimes in like we do semester projects here, but I'll have too many ideas, or just like if I'm messing around on something, I'll have too many ideas, and then it'll get to be where the scope of the game is going way beyond what I thought, and then I get to that thing we were talking about earlier where it's like you lose motivation to do the game because it's gotten so big,
Right.
and then you struggle to keep up with it, or like whenever you're running into creating the game or testing the game, you definitely run into all these bugs that you can then maybe think of a way to turn into a game feature. But, what do you do with those? Is that something that you throw into the back burner?
For my own personal projects, I used to have an issue of like, oh shit, I got too many ideas. But then I'm like, wait, hold on, why don't I just try taking one of these ideas and applying it to something that exists? One of my favorite things to do is take either three types of games. I will take a controller that I've made that's like Ocarina of Time like, or I will have you guys ever played Wizardry? Can I get a thing of hands? Have anybody heard of Wizardry?
I haven't even heard of
Yeah,
it. Get out of here.
God dang. All right, so like Wizardry or a Pokemon like, I'll take those three, and I will have an existing framework from which I will then take my Wizardry game and apply a new feature to it, or I will take my Pokemon game and apply a new feature to it. I think that's a really big thing. Like you should probably take what's existent, go through that process first, and then start adding new things. That's what I find, because it definitely helps me like get out of the way of like, oh, how do I test if this new thing works? And there you go. I've got a perfect play space. So just find a controller, like a type of game that you like. Start that from scratch, because right there that is a wonderful programming experience. I think you could probably bring that to quite a few people and be like, yeah, I did this top to bottom. I know how this works. This is how this works. And you've got a finished game altogether. But then you can kind of start adding on your own flavors. You can start doing your own thing. Do you guys know of Your Only Move is Hustle? Have you guys heard of that game? Yeah. I know Ivy. Ivy's working on a 3D engine. Well, sorry, a 2D engine right now. And his entire scope is basically, I want this to be Super Mario Brothers 3 at the very base. And then from there, I'll start adding things. That's how you do it, man.
That's something that Connor himself actually, or our president, he gave a nice long slideshow on that during one of our seminars here for TigerDev, was actually taking a game that exists already. You can talk about it.
Yep.
I mean, I can talk about I had a somewhat similar experience where I was working. I've had like a big project I've been working on for forever. And if you're working on something for a long while, you end up just thoughts trailing. And at some point, I was like, wow, wouldn't it be cool if the next game I made had the ability to stop time? Which, I mean, first of all, stupid, because I'm not made it took forever to make the first one. Why would I immediately go into the second one? But secondly, I thought about it and I sat down. I was like, I could just put this in the first one, and now it's like a central thing. So it's I'm a huge proponent of just taking ideas you have for future stories or future games and just not framing them, but finding a way to transfuse them into your current projects.
And see, I mean, that's a great reuse of one's work already. And the only reason I say find a game you like and crib it is because it's not a question of oh, what do I do next? My brother, you already know what you need to do next. In the case of say an Ocarina of Time, can you Z-lock? Is there a Z-lock on there? If there's no Z-lock, add the dang Z-lock. That's what you need to do next. So copying other people's work in order to figure out what the heck is going on. That's 100% unnecessary. You can't contribute to this unless you have a basis of what are people doing to begin with. So I mean that's my 2 cents. If you ever run into a problem where you're like I don't know what to make something that exists, and then you get to have the fun part. Whether or not you release it, I don't know. Some people will say like, "Oh, that's just a ripoff." I don't know about that, man. Like hell, Age of Empires is by that metric a ripoff of industrial software because that's a lot of what that code base is. I mean, that's fundamentally it. But you're not going to sit and say that. No, it's a completely holistically new game. So there you go.
My take on the matter is that, especially if you're worried about scope creep, doom creep. Oh my god! If you're worried about that type of issue, my fix has been sleeping on it. Normally, like if I'm working on something, or I have a bunch of ideas of something I want to do with it, uh, I'll just sleep on an idea for a little bit, and then you come back with the sole question: do I really need to? Because there is a certain point where like sometimes you can pull ideas from other things and stick them in there, but eventually your sack can only hold so much, the bag you're holding. And eventually, if you try to shove literally everything in there, you're going to lose sight of whatever it's actually supposed to be. And you want to be careful of that once you start getting too much stuff in there. And to that, I found the best solve is sometimes you sleep on it and decide whether or not something actually needs to go in. If you actually think it's going to help the final product of whatever you're making, whether it be just something that goes in your portfolio or something that you're actually launching, is this going to mesh well with everything else? And is it worth you doing it? And additionally, ask yourself the question of if this can replace something else that's in there. Like maybe you have a mechanic that's a little similar, but this thing would serve in its place and it would provide other benefits. You want to be able to adapt, I suppose, in that way. Scope creep is terrifying, though. It's a monster. Be careful.
You start
Yeah,
looking
the
into the void very quickly. It was
Oh, yeah.
Ben that I stole a quote from where he said, "There is no such thing as originality. There's no such thing as an original thought." You could expand on that a little bit if you want.
Yeah, so this is another case where the question you had about like getting started on new game projects. This was an issue Finn had up until probably 2 months ago, and we've been working together for around 3 years. And the thing he learned was to just find an outlet that allows you to explore your dumb, stupid ideas that are very stupid and dumb on a like 24-hour turnaround basis. He was obsessed with like making a stupid golf game for like a year. And so what he did was he made his own little engine and just made a game called Infinite Golf, which just involves you tapping your mouse on the keyboard and just making the golf ball go into the hole, and then it generates a new like dungeon for you to put your to knock it into the next hole, and it's just infinite. And that was his outlet for getting at least rid of that idea out of his head. Um, but when it comes to the mentioning of like the infinite ideas void that you mentioned, Talon, I guess the real the thing you got to think about, and it's the thing I talk to all of our artists and really anyone who's worked on the project um, prior to, I guess, when we were onboarding. Uh, the thing I sat down with Chris about, and we've had many discussions about it, is like it boiled down to like we are making a game for an audience of a YouTuber of and for the masses obviously, but like you need to be thinking about that when you make stuff, because yes, you might have the coolest idea ever, but someone has absolutely done it before in some capacity, and it may be the coolest art you've ever seen, but we're going to be in this room that you put this art in for 3 seconds of this several hours of game time. So you got to just think about how much time you're dedicating to something versus how much value that time is going to accrue or add to the end product. So if you can make a game with 4 walls in a room, or within 4 walls in a room, and it's just as interesting as in if it was like an open world with massive cities or whatever on it, then like you should go for the 4 walls. it may not be as glamorous or as gorgeous, but it's going to work better, and honestly, it's going to play better too. And it's honestly, I mean, obviously more manageable as well. So when it comes to like creation of ideas, just understand that like the idea doesn't necessarily have value on its own, versus how much time. Because anyone could sit there and say, "Oh yeah, I'm going to make a like Takoya said earlier, like a Grand Theft Auto or something like that, or try to make a game like a Grand Theft Auto," and you can say, "Oh yeah, just give me 250 million and I'll crack it out for you, no problem by Sunday," and like
I'll take that dude, bro. Yeah.
yeah, it's just like you can say that all you want, but that idea or having like a genius idea, if you will, is not going to immediately give you value. It's whether you can execute on the simple things, and that's the most important thing about it.
Execution is the most important word
Mm-hmm.
in life and in projects.
Do we have any questions?
Yeah. No? All right. Well, then in that case, we can end off. There was like a second slideshow someone wanted to present. That was like
Chris?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, this one's going to be a snoozer. Considering you guys are not art dudes, perhaps it will wake up some new questions. Unless you guys feel as if we can call it a day.
Well,
we can go for
the
it.
thing that I have is that I have a lot of questions, and we are 6 minutes over time. So
Oh, then yeah, let's call it.
I have a new plan that I've been sitting here hatching for the last 10 minutes. What if we could hypothetically get you guys in for a second time a few months as the project continues, and perhaps get more people in? So
Yeah.
ask around to other developers. We could get you three plus, or just you three again if you're down. in a few minutes.
Absolutely.
I'd be down,
I
yeah.
would very much like to get Finn in here if we could. I don't know how that scheduling would work out, but he's actually going to be full time, so he should be on our schedule by then.
Yeah, we can just force him to switch schedules.
Yeah, we
just
could
like me.
yeah, we could force him to be CT while in Australia.
I'm not contractually obligated to be.
So yeah, we could probably talk him into that. I think because he's our big programmer genius, and I think you guys would get a lot more value out of him.
He can literally show you
showing
him
up.
doing random stuff. It'd be awesome.
Oh, dude, yeah. If you want to watch him like program an entire game from start to finish while we're here, I mean, we can do that too. Just leave the stream open in the background.
To get him to speed run the development like within an hour.
Yeah. Finish
Well,
game
then-
product. Yeah.
I mean, next time we meet up, I'll show this one off, and I'll get a slideshow prepared for the Vertex animation thing too. So
If you want to share it in this Discord, since you're in it right now, if you wanted to upload a link to it, that'd be just fine, and that would give people the advantage of seeing it in advance if they're interested in it. Because we do have, I think, at least one person who is who are like artists and interested in like shader programming and doing that sort of thing. So there are people who are investigating art. So if you wanted to post a link to that I'd say go for it. But other than that, save it, and we can get back to you in a few months. And you can
gotcha,
just
man.
talk with it, and we can talk
Oh,
more
yeah.
about transients as well. I have a bunch of questions about transients that we just didn't get to because it was too dynamic. This was perfect. This was awesome. So give a round of applause.
yes,
It's coming through really muffled, but we got it. Thank you.
we can see it. It's good.
Yes. Thank you all for coming out and giving a bit of time in your day just to sort of talk about your journey through game development and share it with some budding game developers. We really appreciate it.
Of course, anytime.
Yes,
Yeah,
sure.
man.
But yeah, I think that's unless you guys have any final remarks you'd like to make, we can sort of call it here.
Wait, I have one question. We'll end it here. What's your favorite keybind and why?
I can
Okay.
answer that one.
Go ahead, Chris.
I like Control Alt Space and Control Alt S in Blender. I really like being able to go to the normal direction of my selected face. I sure love that. It's great.
All right, go ahead, Doom.
My keybind by default doesn't actually exist, so you have to stick one in there. I chose Shift Z, and it is the keybind that I use for snap object to view. So in Unreal, when you're moving around, especially if you're like trying to copy or move objects and stuff, you have to like drag it, and you have to move and fix your camera, and then drag it again. If you use snap object to view, it literally just pops up like right behind your head. You just move the camera back a little bit, and boom, it's right there in front of you. It's fantastic. Saved me so much time.
Mine is Control Shift Alt Windows and L for opening LinkedIn, and there you go.
I really thought you were gonna say Alt F4.
No, that's cheating.
Okay.
All right, take it easy, yo.
Thank you, guys. Have a good
Peace,
one.
Bye.
gentlemen.
Yes, sir.